Okay, last week we started the module 3, and we are actually we started by looking at some of the major overview. Okay, don't let me put it in form of a question. Let me just start it and do a quick recap on that instead of taking it as an overview. So basically, we were looking at how you can administer the different Microsoft Azure SQL solution. That is talking about how you can implement a secure environment for the database service, how you can, in terms of authentication and authorization and stuff like that. So today we'll also continue in that line. And the last hands-on class that was basically how you can, set up, let me just go one slide, how you can configure a Microsoft Entra admin using your Azure SQL database. Let me see. Okay. Okay, I want to ensure that I have all my stuff set up already. All the environment we'll be using, or better still, let me stop. Let me just close out. Nope. Okay, let me wait for them to do their thing then. So without wasting much of our time, but before I dive into what we have today, let me ask if there's any question or probably any feedback. Any question, any feedback, then we can move ahead. So I'll take our silence as being no question. And for that, I think I am good to go ahead and, proceed. So basically, when we talk about still administering some of these things we've talked about, okay, there are definitely different ways of going about it. And there are, there's this concept of what is known as security principle, okay? And if you have worked with Azure environment, you discover that at times you might want an application to be able to access or have access to certain services, okay? So what you do is you can create what is known as a security principle. So also within the Azure SQL environment, your security principle could be in terms of login. It could be a user, probably maybe a group or even role, and it can either be whether, within the database or within the server itself. And one thing is we'll also be looking at contained users, we'll get to do some hands-on regarding that. So definitely we understand the concept of whereby you can either, maybe you want certain user, we can still relate it to our AZ-104, the concept of least privilege. Okay. Maybe you want a particular user to have access to maybe certain database. Okay. And when you talk about such, we are actually talking about a contained user. So that means for that contained user, the user is only having access to that particular database, okay? And users can also be mapped to roles. So maybe when I think I'll still liken this to the AZ-104, you have what they call a group. A group is whereby you can have different users within that group. So instead of assigning different roles to those individual users, or maybe instead of assigning similar roles to those different users, you can just create a group, okay, assign the role to the group, and then you make all those users a member of that group, okay? So because the group is having that particular role, okay, so every member of that group automatically have access to that role. Now, remember, we are talking about security principle, and we are saying it could be in form of login, it could be in form of user, it could be in form of group, it could even be in form of role. So all those things boil down to what we are saying, as in how do you want them to authenticate? What level of access do you want them to be able to have regarding either your server or regarding your database? Now, a general overview of your SQL server in terms of security, We have what they call the securable, we have what they call the principal, we have what they call the permission, and you can also have what is known as the security hierarchy. Okay, now when you talk about your securable, one thing you should understand is the securable are basically the resources within your database which you want to kind of authorize. You know, you want to give authorization to. You know, you want the system to have access, or maybe you want somebody to have access. Okay, so basically put, just like what we are seeing on the slide, that securable are simply object to which access must what be secure. And when you're talking about securing, you're talking about who has authority to access it. You know, the concept of authorization and authentication comes into play. In terms of the principal, okay, I've actually talked about that. So it might be in form of, it could be a user, it could be a service. You know, I don't want to dive deep into it, but in Azure, we have what they call the manager identity and we have what they call the user identity, but they are all different types of identity. I can give us a good example, you know, similar to, you know, in different, okay, let's try and just keep it simple, but just understand that for an application, an application does not fall within a user category, okay? But when you are given that application, you know, maybe it could be a web application that needs to write to a database or query a database, okay? So in such a situation, what kind of authentication do you want to allow that particular application to have? That is where the concept of security identity comes into, you know, into play. So let's have that. And when you're talking about permission, of course, definitely the level of permission the principal you're having, which could be maybe the user, the service principal, or even the computer or the group or whatsoever, the kind of permission they have will determine what kind of action they can perform on our object or the securable things we want to you know, secure. And when you're talking about security hierarchy, of course, you are talking about the different kind of roles, okay? And some of these things we are going to see them. Now we have what the schemas and the securable. So, and when you're talking about the securable resources, remember I said earlier that securable are actual resources within your database, or could also say within the server, which to which you want to, you know, you want the authorization system to manage the access or manage the access that people have to them. And when you are talking about example of such securable could be within a database, rather, it could be your table, it could be your view, it could be your store procedure, okay? And when you're talking about the scope could be at the server level, the scope could be at a database level, the scope could be at an object level, or even at the object level. So this is how the scope triple down. You know, if you remember when we're talking about what's this word, when we're talking about Azure, you know, we said something about the fact that when you have permission within the subscription, every other thing within the subscription you have access to. But when that means for the subscription, for the resource group and the resources within that particular resource group. So you can liken that to this particular point we're talking about. So of course, if you have access to the server, that means all the database within that server, of course, you should have access to it. When you talk about having access to the database, so everything within the database, all the tables, you have access to it. So that is just the level of that securable scope we are actually talking about. Please, if there's any question, please don't hesitate to ask, okay? And one thing we need to understand, remember we are actually dealing with the Azure part of this whole concept. Now, so when you are talking about security, when you are in terms of Azure SQL database, it only has two scopes, which is at the database level and at the schema level. Okay, so we should have this at the back of our mind that in terms of security, if you look at your normal SQL Server instance, the different scopes, server, database, schema, object. But when you talk about the Azure SQL database, we're only talking about the securable scope is in terms of database and in terms of what? Of schema, okay? And of course, we know what a schema is, you know, talk about different objects, which you can group into different namespace and stuff like that. And if you remember, we said a schema could be table, it could be views, it could be store procedures, and, you know, every other thing within that. And also when we talk about logins and users, okay, just like if I come here, close this, okay, I think I still have transaction. Which transaction is going on? Do you want to continue and close the window? I don't want to continue. Okay, yes, let me close this one out. So I just want to, okay, I think I don't know what's going on here. I think the best thing is, let me just shut this thing down. Close. I hope it's not some commands that, okay, let me see if I can get my task manager. No, tax manager, not tax. No, you, okay. Let me just close it out from here. Come up, come up, come up, come up. Okay, let me just shut this one down. And tax. Okay, I think I can hope it's not making my system to freeze. Okay, let's go on. But I want this one too because I'll be needing it for the hands-on lab. Close. Sorry. Why is it SQL? Oh, I've actually disconnected this one that you're telling me query. Okay, I think I get it. Close. Stop. Don't. Unable to determine whether this transaction. Do you want to continue and close? Yes. This is getting interesting. Let me just try this one more time. Tax manager. Sorry, please. Let me just try and tax. Let me just close this one in tax. Okay. I won't let this one be, but let's just move on. Hopefully, I should be able to do what I want to do. Okay, so let's just move on. When we get there, let's see. Probably I'll need one of you to share your screen while we'll move on. So we are still talking about the different we've talked about securable and we looked at the securable scope, okay, and we made mention that when you're talking about your Azure SQL database, okay, the securable scope is just at the database and at the schema level. Now, of course, we know the concept of users and the concept of logins, okay, and this is what I actually wanted to show us that this stuff is actually okay. Let's see if I can just open another instance of it. Let me see if I can open another instance of it. But basically, when we talk about the logins, of course, we know that logins are created at the master database. And, when you have your login within your master database, definitely you have access to, the server. It gives you the server access, okay? And normally we always have, they will tell you it's an SQL server instance. That means you can have, okay, I think we'll work with this second one then. Okay, good. So let me just come to my local Okay, so good. So basically, this is my this is one instance of my SQL server. Even this, I'm not even supposed to go into. I'm not supposed to go deep into this. We are supposed to just focus on the major Azure part. But let me just quickly go through this one. Okay. Now, when you talk about the instance level permission, they actually apply to logins. Why database level permission apply to users? So if we come here, let's see. I don't think I have any, but let me just quickly show us. If we come under this security, if we come under login, okay, so now these logins, okay, so if you look at this, all these ones, okay, now if I pick up one of these, this is at what I've just shown us is at the server level, okay. So if I open this and I come to security, let me minimize this one. So if I come under this security, okay, so if you look at, we have users at this database level, okay. So these are some of the users we have here, a contain users. And when you talk about these contain users, we are still going to see it. Discover that these contain users can only access, this particular DB. So if I try to access any of these using this particular user account, I will not be able to do that. Okay. Now they said the user has access only to the database in which is just what I've just shown us here. That all these users now they are created on this under this particular database, so they can only have access to this one. Whereas if we come under this security, and if you look at this one, they are known as logins. Okay. So they have access to this SQL server instance. So all the databases within this SQL server instance, they can access it. Whereas, okay, if we look at this other one too, and you come to security here, and you come to users here, okay, you discover that all these users, they have access. They can only access this, but the other particular databases, they are not able to do that. And definitely we have different built-in database roles. Okay, when you look at it from the SQL server or from the Azure SQL database, they have what they call, I think we saw something. Let me just quickly, if we come here, server role. Okay, so these are the different server roles. Okay, we have the bulk admin. Some of these things we'll still see it in our next slide, but this is at the server level. Okay, so let's see from the database level. Let me minimize this. So if you look at role at the database level, so now for Azure, because this, oh, sorry, this is not an Azure database. Okay, so you discover that we have the database role and you have the application role. So if we break this one down, so at the database level, these are some other ones. Okay, some of these things we are going to see in our slide. So we'll just quickly go through them. Now, one thing you need to understand that the master database, okay, I think it will be ideal. Let's just quickly create just an SQL server, so that while we are going through the slide, that will have been provisioned already. Okay, so I want everything here to go away. Let me clean out this one so I won't forget. That was what I was trying to do earlier. So let me minimize this. So let's just so let's go for this. So we are creating a server, a logical server, and a database instance. Let's create so that we can see some of what we are actually talking about. Okay, we want a single database. Let's create a resource group. So we'll create the Poshem resource group. Okay, this is valid. So let's call it the Poshem DB. Let's create a new server. So let's call it the Poshem server. Let's see. Let me just go for UK South, if that will work. Okay. Is there any other thing? Okay, let's use our SQL authentication. I'll call it admin user. I'll put my password. Okay, did they match? Okay. Okay, let's see. We'll take for production. So let's change this one and just keep it simple. Local. I'm sure this particular setup is something we are familiar with. Okay. There are some certain things. This is also something we've actually provisioned using the CLI. Let me go to the networking. Just to make our life easier, but I'll still show us, okay? You can just click on this public endpoint, click on this, and to be able to connect straight up, okay? But you can also do it either way. So just to make it easier, I want it to automatically add my current IP of my system. So instead of doing that, and we'll also see the importance of this encryption, okay? I think we'll get to talk about that. So let me see. Okay. So the only thing I want to do is I want that database to have a sample data. So I'll just click on yes. I think every other thing is good to go. So once I click on, create, once it validates, then we'll go back so that we'll just know we already have this created. So instead of when we get there, I remember when we talked about ARM template earlier, one of the method of provisioning, this is where you've created a particular Azure SQL database and server, so you can download this and you can use it to reproduce. We've talked about this in our subsequent class, so you can in our previous class rather, so you can just check and see how you can set up an Azure SQL server and database using an template. Okay, I think this is being provisioned, so let's move on. So we've seen the different roles, both at the server level and at the database level. Okay, even this one, when you talk about the fixed, so we saw this one, but we can also double check at the, so these are the database level. So if we come here, so this is, you discover that this one is at the server role. So if you look at some of sysadmin, setup admin, server admin, security admin, process admin, so those are some of what we are seeing here. Okay, the public. So if you check this one, you also see the public. So that is how you're able to see all those particular ones. So for database role, now we want to actually look at, what are the database role in your regular SQL server and your Azure SQL database. Okay. So now, of course, we know that roles are actually meant to, in terms of privilege, the more how will I liken it? More like, there's this concept that they say great power comes with great responsibility. So simply put, the more access you have, the more powerful you are. Or let me try and liken it to what we are looking at. When you have a higher role, so that means you are able to navigate or do a lot or have more access to the server and even to the databases within the server. Okay. So now when you talk about in your SQL server and even when you talk about Azure SQL managed instance, when you talk about, we have the scope of the role, maybe the database or the server, as in, it could either be your role, the scope of your role can be either at the database level or it could be at the server base or at the server instance. Okay. But one thing about Azure SQL Server databases, the role are scope to individual databases. So let's see if this is okay, still pro. Okay, good. Think we are good to go. It has finished provisioning. So let's just connect. I will be able to. So like I said, this is the this is the SQL Server instance on my system. So now I want to connect to the one we have just provisioned. So of course we put the server name, which I actually copied. This is the server name, okay? So I've included that one. Remember we use the SQL. So I'll put the admin user. Then let me sign up. So let's connect. So now, so the one of the major difference between your SQL Server, okay, and your Azure SQL database, okay, is that in terms of role, the role has scope at the database individual, not even, that's why they call it Azure SQL. I remember when we were creating it, was asking, you want to create a single database, okay? Now, but one thing is, when you talk about your SQL Server and your Azure SQL database, they actually also have what is known as the inbuilt database role, okay? And with this one, you can also, there's also room for you to create maybe custom roles, okay? So let's see if we have been able to log into, okay, good. So if you look at this now, yeah, if you look at this one, you have the database, you have the security, right? So if you come here, if you come to this system database, you have all these ones where you have the masters, the model, and all those stuffs, okay? So let's keep this one. But if we come to this one now, okay, even if you bring this one down, the only thing we have here is the master database, okay? So if we come here, okay, let's check something. At the security, we have logins. This is the login that was created while creating this server instance, okay? So for this one now, if I come here, this is the database within that. So if I come to security, if I come to user, okay, so these are the users. So if we come to roles, we have the database role. We've seen this one earlier. Okay, so we have all this. So now, so there are some special rules for your Azure SQL databases. And what are these special rules? Okay, and these rules, in terms of the master database, you have some rules that are, if we come to, let me just come back here. Where's that master database? So this is the master database. So if I come under this, let's check this. So these are some of the roles here. Okay, so that's basically what we are being saying. That you have the DB manager. When you talk about the DB manager, the major purpose is the ability to create and delete databases. Okay, you also have, and this one is within your normal SQL server. It is equivalent to your DB creator. So let's just confirm if we have the DB manager. DB manager, DB manager. This is it here. Okay, so this is it. You also have the login manager. I think that one's also, this is the login manager. Okay, so basically what we are just trying to say is that, for the Azure SQL database, there are some functionalities that are within, or there are some roles, or let's even just do it this way. So for this one now, at the master database level, if we decide to count, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you basically, you can just screenshot this and compare, you'll discover that there are differences between, some of this, what you have at the SQL Azure database and that of your normal SQL instance. So for the built-in database role, we've even seen some of this. Basically, that's where we are currently. You have the DDB, DDL admin and stuff like that. So I've shown us all this, even the DB-D9 data reader. So if you look at this, where is DB-D9 data reader? This is it. DB-D9 data reader, DB-D9 data writer. Okay, so those are just the various different database roles. So I think we can move on with that. Now, there's this concept of database and object permission. Of course, I will not go into that. When you talk about when you talk about will I call it transact SQL commands? We have what they call the DML, we have what they call the DCL, we have what they call the DDL, and we have what they call the So let me even ask. So let me ask. So what's the full meaning of DML? What's the full meaning of DCL? Are we together? Hello?
Hey, Prof. I mean, listen mode. DCL is that's a data control language. That's
Okay.
so I won't be able to be answering all your questions. I'm outside, so I don't want to disturb anybody. Please.
Okay. Noted. Okay. So, okay, let me just quickly, well, I'll just do a high level overview. So when you talk about the DML, those are data manipulation language. And of course, it works more on tables and views. And a good example, the insert, the select, the update, the delete. Okay. So when you talk about we also have the DDL, which is data definition language. And when you are talking about the DDL, you are talking about the create, okay, the alter, the drop. Now I've talked about the ML. So the other one is this DCL. I think you just data control language, which you talk about, and it has to do with grant, deny, revoke, and and I think there's also another one. They call it TCL, transaction control language. Okay, I think example is under the rollback. Which other one? And even DQL, yes, data query language. But these are just some of the different kind of, and they have different purposes. Let me put it that way. They have different purposes or use case. Okay. So when you talk about the DDL, the major purpose is either you want to define or you want to alter the schema and the structure. So when you talk about DML, you talk about you talk about maybe you want to insert, you want to update, you want to delete data. And when you talk about the DCL, they are talking about grant, revoke, all those kind of permission. When you talk about the TCL, you are talking about managing transaction. And when you talk about the DQL, you are talking about querying or actually trying to retrieve data. Now, in terms of database and object permission, okay, of course, this is something we've actually talked about earlier. That in terms of permission, you can either assign permission to either users or a role within a database. And one thing is that when you assign the permission to a role, users can be attached or assign that particular role. Okay. And in terms of permission could be additive. Okay. Additive in the sense that a user can have more than one permission. And meaning that, from multiple, even a user can be a member of different roles. So definitely such a user that is a member of different role will have different or multiple permission. That is where the concept of what that additive comes into play. So when you talk about preventing access, you prevent access through deny. Okay. And one thing we should always understand is that when you are preventing access through a deny, any form of grant that has been given, it will always override, meaning this is much more superior than this. Okay. Oh, my bad. Okay. This is just a sample of grant denied. So okay. Now you can execute maybe a query either as a user or as a login. Now I think we'll get to see one of these in one of our hands-on today. Okay. And okay, let me say something about ownership. Ownership chain. I think where's this? There's a picture that will explain it better. There's a picture that will explain it better. But simply when we're talking about ownership chain, okay, this is a situation whereby, or it's actually made use of when you want an object to be able to carry out a task on another object. Now, if we look at this chart that we have here, okay, and a good example of this, it actually comes from, when you're talking about maybe stop procedure, a good example. So now this is the user one, okay, and this user, if you look at this view one is owned by user two, and this view two is owned by user one, okay, but this user one has been granted permission to both view, okay. So now, as a result of this, so if you look at this now, is able to use this first view to get this table, okay. Now, but it does not have this particular one. So all I'm trying to say in essence is that when you talk about ownership chain, the best way I can explain this is, you have maybe a permission based on certain permission to be able to do some certain things. Now, a good example has to do with, I think the easiest example that comes to my mind is the concept of stop procedure. So stop procedure might not even have that permission on certain, you can run a stop procedure on different databases, okay, based on the concept of what? This ownership chain. That's just the simplest way I can explain that. So let's quickly jump and execute a stop procedure as a lower privilege user, okay, and we'll see how it works. Okay, I think I have some of my scripts. Let me see, just to make things easier for us. Okay, so this is what's under that. This is what we want to do. So I think we already have this. So let's confirm. I think this should be by now. Let me just close out on this particular one. Okay, can leave this one here. Okay, we have this. I think I've even connected to it. I've connected to it already. So if we come here, let's check all the tables. Okay, let me just see. This should be the particular database. Remember when we're deploying that database? Okay, so good. So this is actually the Adventure Work LT database. I just decided to change the name of that database. So basically what we want to achieve now is we want to execute a stop procedure as a lower privilege user. Now, if you look at some of the particular thing I've written here, okay, let me start with this particular one, okay. Now, this, while I was deploying the database and the server, I actually in terms of the I enable it to allow to be able to use my IP address for me to be able to access it, okay. But if you want to do that using the Azure portal, all you need to do is go to the server. Let me open it on another tab. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see. Okay, good. So you can just come down here. If you check your networking, you can see that. So if you click on this, if you scroll down, you will discover that if you, while I was creating it, you didn't you didn't check on that, allow your IP, you will not see this. But when you come here under this networking and you come to this particular place, okay, you can click on this, because if you look at what I have here and what I have here, it's still the same my IP. So by default, based on the fact it has allowed it. So this is one way you can do it. And if you, another way you can also do it is you can also do it through, you can set it using this particular query that you have here. Okay, you can use it. Now, if you look at this, your start IP, which is similar to, let me just give us a better understanding of this. So if you look at it, was my start IP, this one was my end IP, this one. So if I want to use that particular one, all I need to do, just to save time, that's why I decided to. So you can just, let me highlight this. So all you need to do is this. Okay, so just copy and execute, and you are good to go. Okay, so that's just one way. And in the case of this 00, when you put 00, that means you want any IP. But the particular one I did, let me go, oh, sorry. Oops. Undo. Oops. I hope I've not messed this thing up. Where? Okay, where is it? This is interesting. Supposed to have more than this. Where did it jump to? Okay. Did I copy it? But basically, all I'm trying to say is that where you have that 00, let me close this thing and bring it up again. I hope I didn't save the last one, Visual Studio Code. Okay, let's see. I actually didn't save. Where are they? Okay, good. This is what I want. I think I can save this one now. So all I'm trying to say is that if you leave this 000, that means you are saying that any IP can connect to that particular Azure SQL database you have created. Okay. But if you put your own specific IP address, just like what we have here, okay, you are saying it is only this particular one. Of course, you can add more than one. So let's have that at the back of our mind. Okay. But that is not the aim and objective of what we want to achieve. Okay. So the next thing is, like I said the other time, we have what they call the concept of content database. Okay. So what we've done is, I'm sure in previous class, but let me just quickly do that. We can restore. So I don't want us to work on that default database. Let's just restore a database. Then we'll create a contain user so that we'll see how it works. And remember, I said that when you're talking about contain user, a contain user is a user that has access to a particular database. Even from the word contain, you are containing it or limiting it to that particular database. So let's do this. So if you look at this now, even if I come from the Azure portal, okay, so I will, if you look at this in terms of SQL database, this is just the one we have and it's currently showing online. Okay, a quick one. So if we come here, let me minimize all these ones. If I come here under this database, let's say I want to restore, you have different ways of restoring. So I can just do import data. And make this one bigger. So let's go to next. So I want to import this one. So assuming you are storing it on Azure data store, Azure storage, you can import it from this particular place and it will ask you your container name, or let's see if we can quickly do that. But these are some other things we'll do in our bots. But this is the, okay, let's just keep it simple and short for now. We want to import from local disk, but it's still the same thing. So I want this particular one because that's the one I want to use with my script. So if you look at it, Adventure works. Okay. So I can use, okay, let me use this one, AdventureWorks. Okay, I'll just change the name from backpack. Okay, this 250 gig is too big, so let me just give it 2. Let's see, I cannot choose basic, so let me just, based on the tier, so let me just continue with that one. So this is one way of restoring your database. So what you discover is that I already have 2 existing backup in terms of backpack. So I'm actually restoring it. And after the restoration, so in one of the database, we are going to, especially, we are using this one. So we are going to create a contain database, okay, on that particular, I mean, a contain user. So the name of that contain user, this will be the, the username, and this will be the password, okay, and we'll try to log in, and see if we can access this database instance. I mean, this particular one that we have, this particular SQL server, okay, and we'll see if we can access it with that particular user. And if not, we'll see if we can access that particular database alone. So let's wait for it to, okay, it's deploying. So let's just move ahead. So, okay, we'll do this one. We are currently working on this one. We'll talk about this one. So let's just wait for, okay, so please, if there's any question, let's feel free to ask. So let's give it some few more minutes. Okay, just 2 more steps. Okay, while we are waiting, I think I can just quickly show this. In this same, let me just create a storage account. I actually, just to show you another way of where you can restore if you have your backup. Because if you're in the cloud, you might want to use all the cloud services, or you're in the cloud. So I'll just use our existing resource group. I'll just call it Poshem. Okay, I think we have one Poshem storage. Let's see. Storage accounts. I'll just say storage. I'm using it as a storage. Let's keep it at local. We are not doing anything. Okay, allow anonymous here. What else? Okay, let's keep this one. Do we need any other? Let's see, networking access from here. This is important. Data protection encryption. I think we can create now, but let's check this if it has. Okay, it's still in progress. So let's use the opportunity to create and see. So for this one, once we'll upload the database here, okay, I'm just going to show us. I'm not going to, so that it will not take as much time as this one, but I'll just show us how to pull it, how to connect it to this, and then so let's check if there's anything we want to change. I don't think there's anything we want to change here. So let's wait for it to give us the green light. Okay, it has started deploying. Okay, good. So let's check back on this one. This one is still in progress. So let's see the storage, if the storage has finished deploying. I think I will have even used a smaller database, or big. Okay, no worries. Too soon. Okay, good. So this is your storage account. So of course, for you to be able to, you have to come to this data management, then to the container. You want to create a container. So I'll just call that container, let me call it backup. Okay, no capital lock, no capital, right? Backup. Okay, let me just put it as backup. I want it to be anonymous, but this, yeah, let me create this. Okay, so on this one, I want to upload that backup that I actually use. So it's asking me to browse. Okay, let me go to the desktop. Let me see, where's my city? Okay, come here. DP300. My resources. Let me check the here. No, I want my backpack. Where did I? Let me see. Resources. Where do I have those two? Okay, I can just use one of these. It doesn't really mean I can use this one. Let me just upload this one. Upload. Just want to show you the concept of how it works. Wow, this is taking more than expected. Okay, but no worries. Let's just, that means we'll not be able to until this one is complete. Okay, so basically, okay, what we'll do is instead of waiting for this one to be provisioned, importing package schema and data into, and basically this is actually showing us or telling us something that the bigger the database, the longer it will take for you to restore it. Okay, that is just it. And if we look at this particular database, this one is so if we look at this is just about 7 MB, and we are still on it. So if you remember when we are talking about the hyperscale, we talked about the different databases, and there are some that will take you less than 1 minute for you to be able to restore. So you have to take all those things into consideration. So we'll just give this one time to complete, then we'll come back. And one other thing is when you talk about dynamic SQL, there's this dynamic means something that is changing. We can liken this to even websites. We have what they call static website, and we have dynamic websites. A good example of dynamic website is if you go to any of these maybe you want to book a flight. Okay, you discover that the destination and the prices are not always constant. I mean, they are not always the same. That means they are not static, they are always changing. So that's an example of a website that has dynamic content. Okay, but maybe for somebody that is just maybe a portfolio, or you visited the bow, or maybe somebody portfolio where the person have his or her CV, or personal website, of course the person's pictures, and that can be up and running for maybe 3, 4, 5 months without any change. So that's more like a static website. So coming to dynamic query, or dynamic SQL rather, we are talking about this kind of SQL that the queries are not hard coded. Hard coded in the sense that they are, let me use the word, you write them, I won't use the word on the fly, but they are something that if you look at this now, select backup, we are going to try this once. Let's see. Wow, this is taking longer than expected, but we'll give it time. Assuming I know, I will have just created a simple database, then just created a backup of it. But no worries. We'll definitely, even if today we get to talk and we are not, but definitely I'm sure before we close out on today's, this one will definitely end. But let me just probably go ahead and just do the explanation. So if we are not able to do the other hands-on, but definitely we have a lot of hands-ons that are actually embedded within this particular modules, and most of the script I've actually written them out so as to save our time. But I'll just give a general overview in terms of maybe explanation, and if possible, let's see, the ones we can do today, we'll do that, but let's just wait for this one. So all I'm trying to say is that even if we are not able to undo most of them today, once this one is completed, that means tomorrow we might just be having a lot of hands-on and, you know, just demo class instead of, but let's just go ahead with some of the explanation. So basically we can, you know, talk about dynamic SQL, which I've said that you actually use it to, you are not at coding those particular, you know. Now this one, we are going to see this because we are going to try this one. And when you actually write out this, it will create, it will give you a list of all the, it will create a kind of command for you to back up all the databases that are present within your SQL server. So from that query it will generate, you can just copy. Let's assume you have 5. Let's assume the result of this one is about 5 different lines of code that were generated on how you can create a backup. You can copy the first one, run it, it will back up the, copy the second line of code, script, run it, it will back up the second one. Okay, so that is just the concept of this dynamic. Okay, it gives you, you know, it generates it, not that you hard code it. Okay, now I've talked about the concept of list privilege earlier. You know, when you talk about list privilege and in terms of security, this is very, 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 very important. Okay, and it basically has to do with the fact that you don't give people, or you don't give your user more than the permission they need to do their job. Okay, and even apart from the concept of list privilege, there's this other concept which is known as JIT. Yeah, just in time. Just in time. And I think within Microsoft, there's this concept. Let's assume okay, let's, a good user example, or a good use case could be, let's assume that maybe as the senior database admin, you're probably going for maybe vacation, or probably you are going on your leave. Okay, and you, or let's just say you will not be around for 2 weeks, and maybe your assistant or the junior database administrator needs to do some certain things on your behalf, and probably maybe where you are going, you're actually going for vacation and you'll be out of reach or whatsoever, or probably you are going for something that maybe a kind of training that you really want to focus on it. So what you can do is, with this just in time, you know, I'm just trying to liken it, or just to tell you another concept apart from list privilege. With this just in time, you can give a 2-week permission to that junior database administrator to be able to do some certain things you do without using your own account, or without reaching out to you every time, every now and then. Okay, so you can give such permission to that person, and you discover that once that time elapses, automatically that permission, that privilege, that role will be what? Will be revoked. Even you as the senior admin, you don't need to go to the back end and do those things. Okay, so let me just see just in time, but this is just an additional level in Azure. Just wanted to just introduce this. It said just-in-time access in Azure is a security feature that protects Azure virtual machine from unauthorized access. It allows you to grant access to VM only when needed for a limited time, and even on a specific spot. Okay, so that's just another concept in terms of, you know, if you don't want to talk about the, if you don't want to use the list privilege. Okay, I think, wow, okay, at least we are making progress. We are making progress. We are making progress. We are making progress. So I'm sure this will, in the next couple of minutes, we'll be through with this one. So that's just the concept. So another point to add to this list privilege is, you know, when you talk about maybe the user is running an application, and that user need just to, all the feature they need, all the permission they need is for them to be able to use the store procedure. Okay, then that user should only have the execute permission for that particular stored procedure. Okay, so you should not give that user more than this particular permission, which is the execute permission. That is the concept of what least privilege, giving them the that particular permission. You don't give them more than, you give them that particular permission, they need to do their assigned task. And when you talk about under identity or under authentication and authorization, there are times you could, there could be an error, and the error could be either people are trying to log in, or people are trying to, maybe in terms of database resources being exhausted or being, overutilized, or maybe there's this extended authentication failure. Okay, how do you go about resolving it, or what are the needed action you need to take in order to rectify this? Okay, now when you're talking about the login failure, okay, what you need to do is you don't just start troubleshooting. The first thing is, if you talk about this Microsoft Azure database, let me just show us that Azure service dashboard. There's what they call the health. Okay, so even if I come here, where's my mic? So basically what I'm saying is that there are some certain things that you don't just start troubleshooting just like that. Okay, the first thing is you need to actually, if you come to, it's still loading, so if you come to this under the service health, you get to know if there are some certain things that is actually. So if you look at this now, the scope is all, the subscription is all, the subscription, all region, all services. For now, there's no active issue. So if there is any active issue, if you look at this, when it is blue, that means all these particular locations or region are in good shape. But when you have this particular one, that means that region is having a kind of it could be outage, it could be maybe issue, and Microsoft is actually very, 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 aware of that. So there are times that you need to first just check the Azure service dashboard. From there, you get to understand if it is maybe an outage that is affecting maybe not just you, but maybe it could be a regional, it could be, maybe global or whatsoever. Okay. And when you talk about maybe database reaching their resource limits, okay, in terms of maybe the compute and the storage resources are, being overutilized. So of course, definitely this could also bring about a kind of error, where in terms of the resource limit is being existed, it has been exited, or it has been overutilized. Let me just put that word. And so definitely, of course, with that, that is either you increase, we talked about the concept of what's this thing, scaling up, scaling vertically, and scaling horizontally. So definitely, maybe if you are using S0, you might decide to go for S1 in order to increase the storage and the memory and the CPU utilization, of that particular database. And when you talk about extended authentication, okay, when there's an extended authentication failure, what should actually come to your mind is the best way to go is maybe raising a support ticket from your Azure portal. That you can always do, even if you come to this place. Let's go back to our database. So if I come here, let me just open this one. Okay, I think this is the one we restore. It's already showing here. So if you look at it, adventure work from backpack, let's see if this is completed. Okay, I think it's still showing in progress. Just this one. So once it is done, but if we look at it from Azure environment, you can see that, remember that this one was the one we created by, even if you look at the name Poshem this DB / this. So this one is the one we restored, okay, ourselves. That's why we said adventure work from backpack, okay. So this one is still being So, okay, I wanted to show something. So if we come here, move down under this help. So in case you want to raise a ticket, okay, you go to, even from here, you can see the resource health. So let's see. That's another way. Okay, they say resource health watches your resources and tell if it is running as expected. So everything is available. So right now there's no issue from anywhere. So now for that of raising the support ticket, okay, so you can do that by clicking this support. So from here they will ask you what's the kind of issue, and at times after you've described, you'll be giving suggestion on how to resolve it. But if you feel you want to talk to maybe a support engineer, it will, just follow the process. It's something that is simple and straightforward, and you'll be able to have that. Okay, let's move on. Please, if there's any question, don't hesitate to ask. So protect data in transit and data at rest. Okay. Now, this is the overall objective. And like I told you, I think we are still on the first hands-on we are supposed to do. The second one, let me just do a quick okay, the second one is this one. Okay, I can tell you that don't worry, because we definitely, once that first one is done, we'll definitely we'll revisit it. So that's why I've actually compiled everything and the script we need to do, in this place. So we'll just follow them one after the other in order to achieve it. So even, we are actually waiting for this to be completed, because most of what we'll do will be working with some of this database, and there's no way we can, connect to this one again when this one is basically running. So not like overstretching the CPU, the storage, and whatsoever. So that's why we would like this one to be completed before we move on to the next one. So we are actually on the next lesson about protecting data in transit and data at rest. Okay. So when we talk about, we look at the different data options that are available, and we'll look at how you can configure data at rest when you talk about the Microsoft SQL, but we'll focus more on Azure SQL database. Okay. And we'll look at how we can, do this using the Azure Key Vault. There's a hands-on showcase regarding this. And even for the database, you want to create firewall at the database instance and at the server level instance, just like what I said earlier. If we use this as an example, okay, well, we are going to set that up too. We are going to set that up. Okay, so it's just like this is our server. So we can set up a firewall that will give us access to this server. And once we have access to the server, all the databases within the server, we will be able to access them. Secondly, you can set up a firewall at the database level, meaning you can only access the database and not, of course, yeah, you'll still be seeing this, but it is only that database that you have been permitted, or your IP address has been whitelisted to access, you will see. Unlike if I use this, let's assume this is our Azure server that we've connected to. If I go to database, remember that we are seeing 1, 2, 3, 4. We are seeing 5 different databases. Now we'll be able to see all these databases if the firewall has been provisioned at the server level. That means we are granted access to the server level. So all the databases within it, we will be able to see it. But if we set up the firewall at the database level, and this is the only one we are giving access to, okay, that means when we log in, we'll see this, but we'll just see one single database, because that is the way the database firewall has been configured. Okay. Remember that we are still talking about security features within the Azure environment. So that is just basically how that one works. Okay. So let's move on. Please, any question, don't hesitate to ask. Okay. Now, when we talk about encryption at rest, now the first thing we need to really understand is that encryption at rest is not it does not mean you're actually encrypting the data within the database. Encryption at rest is basically you are providing protection against maybe somebody trying to restore a backup to an unsecure server, or trying to make a copy of a database and maybe the transaction log files, and trying to attach it to another unsecure server. So encryption at rest is majorly not you protecting the data within that database. So let's have that at the back of our mind. And when we talk about encryption at rest, okay, it actually does not, I've talked about that it is not just protecting, it is not majorly protecting the data within that database. Okay. So if you look at some of what is stated here, the encryption at rest actually protect the data file, the transaction which I've talked. And of course, it will require setting maybe a certificate to bring them back online. Now, when you talk about the Azure SQL Server and the Azure SQL database, you can implement this through what they call the TDE, data transparent data encryption. Okay. Now we'll look at ways on how you can do this. Let's see. This is interesting. The interesting part is this database is not yet. Let me do this. It's not yet reflecting yet, but if we go to the Azure portal, we already seen it here, but let's give it more time. I was trying to see if we can see it popping up here. Okay, it's popping up, but let's just see. So this is it. It's popping up. Okay. So like I said, we can just maybe do a quick general overview regarding the theoretical part today, and tomorrow we'll just dive much more into the hands-on. Okay. And the reason being that is that we are still waiting on this to deploy. Now, a quick overview of this. What we did was we restore a database .backpack, okay, in two ways. We did it from, we have the backup on our local system. And the second way, which we want to do, I'll see if it will work even with that one, without this one being completed. Okay, we saw that process when we started this. Now, what we did is, if you look at within our Azure portal, we created a storage account. And what we did was to upload the backup. So another way you can restore, if we come here, we want to import this. So it's giving us that same option. Now, the only difference is that instead of us importing from the local disk, what we'll do is to import from Azure window. And here we are importing it from our storage account. So we have to connect. So the first thing is I have to sign in. So which one? Let me see. Okay, let me get this confirmation. Okay, Femi Star. Okay, I think I got that now. Okay, let me sign into this. I'm sure it will ask me to authenticate. Let me get my stuff ready. Okay, let me bring up my Okay, I'm imputing my. So let's see. Just to confirm, just wait, see, it has seen the Azure subscription. So if we come here, what's the name of, remember this is the storage account. Okay, this is the, okay, but let's come back here. So let's see, might take a while, but it has seen the, okay, good. So it has brought this one. So now it will, since we have just one container, it will automatically populate. So let's wait for it. Okay, good. Remember that the name of the container, let's just go back and double check this, but that is just basically it anyway. I just want to show us. This is the storage account, Poshem storage account. So if we go under container, we have just one container and the container is called the backup. So if we come back here, look at this. So you have the storage account, the container. If you click on OK, so what do you want to call it? This is the file name. Okay, so if you click on next, so from here, so this one too, you can say this from Azure, but I'm not going to, because of, this one, we are still on it. So you can change this one. What's the size? I want it to be 2 gig. Let's say continue. So instead of finish, I won't click that finish because we are still on the, okay, good, finally. So we can close this. So the same thing is applicable. The same thing is applicable, just like what we did. So once you click on, but the difference here is that instead of restoring from our local system, we're actually restoring from the Azure storage account. Okay, so let me close out on this. So okay, I think we are good to go with this particular one. So we have this. So let's see what else can we do. Okay, we are, let's come here. So there are some certain things. Let's see if we can take one more. If we look at this, if I come here, I've actually explained the concept of this one in terms of setting up your firewall. Okay, and right now we don't have an issue with that, because assuming our firewall has not, while I was deploying the server, I've done that. That is why you discover that even if okay, let me do this just to confirm that. Let me disconnect and let me reconnect again. Okay, so assuming you are having firewall, this is it. So I will just, okay, so assuming my IP has not been whitelisted for the firewall, there will be a pop-up. It will ask you to log in and stuff like that. Okay, but because there is no, I just sign in, and I've shown us earlier the reason for that, or how you can do that. But just to recap, if you come here, let me go to the server. If you even just check, just type in network or networking, click on the networking, just under the public, click here. You can add. Okay, so it has created this, and I've told you there are times that if you want a lot of servers, different servers, but the best security features is always try and either use an IP address range in the sense that it could be, maybe from this particular IP to this particular. That's why there is this concept of start and stop. I mean, start and end IP. So if you have more than one, so it could be maybe the last, whatever is changing, then you could just vary it. Okay, or better still, but if it is just maybe like 2 different IP, you can add that one. Just make sure that the start and the end pin, if it is an IP range, then this will be different. But if it's the same IP, this can be the same thing. That is one way of doing that. Okay. So now the next thing we want to do is, I've talked about this. So now let's create a contain user, okay, based on this database we've just restored. Okay, so now if I come here, this particular one, so if I don't want to say use this database, I can just click on it and a new query automatically. That means anything I'm doing it on this particular database. I'm coming. How come I'm seeing just one database? We're supposed to see the two. Okay, we can work with this. We can work with this. Okay, so basically, so let me just, I will walk us through the scripts. I'll walk us through the scripts. This is just what we need anyway. I think I would love us to see the two databases instead of just, we're supposed to see the two. What's happening? I'm coming. You have access to the two earlier. Let's go to this. Let's go back to the server. Let's come back to this server. If we click on this, we have these two. So why are we not seeing the two here? Okay, let me do something. Let me close out, connect again. I think that should be the same server, but just to be double sure, let me go over. Still the same thing, Poshem server. Poshem server. Admin user. So let's wait for it. Still loading. So let's refresh. Let me refresh it one more time. Okay. This will defeat the purpose of what I want us to achieve. Azure Data Studio. I need to just confirm something. Now with the authentication. Admin user. Let's see. Let's connect here. We've not created any firewall rule yet, so seeing this one alone is not ideal. So let's check if we have the same. So that's what I'm trying to connect from here, just to be double sure. Because if you remember, before we signed out, we saw both the Poshem DB and the other one we just restored. So this will give me a confirmation if something is wrong. So let's wait. Okay. Okay, can you see? Aha. So I wonder what is happening here. So this is just what I wanted to confirm, that we're supposed to see both from this end, which is what we are seeing here. But I wonder what is happening here. Okay, let me see if I can do this. No, don't save. Let me just close out, okay? And bring it up again. Because this is what I wanted to confirm, that we should be able to see. Because once we now create that contain user, then we should only be able to, when we log in, this is the only one. Since we are seeing that one alone, that means the purpose of what we want to achieve is actually being defeated, because now we have actually, we've not created any contain user, we've not created any firewall rule, maybe at the database or at the server level. So we are supposed to see this because our server, we've granted that network or the firewall at the server level. That's why we are seeing this too. So let's do not recover. So let's connect and see. Okay. Admin user. Let's connect. So let's wait for it. Okay, we're connected. Still loading. Okay. This is super funny to me. Okay, but let's see if we can achieve what we want to do with the Azure Data Studio. Because if you look at the same connection we did, we are seeing the two databases here. And this one we are seeing just one. So I wonder what is actually going on here. So, but let's move on. That's why it's always, thank God we have another alternative. So let's move on. So basically what we want to now achieve is this. Let's just see. So like I said, we want to create a contain user. That means we want to just more like allow a particular user to be able to access just a single database. So let's okay, let's see. I've not actually tried that on the Azure database. I mean, I've not tried it using Azure Data Studio. But this one, what we want to do it on this particular one. So I'll just paste this. So, okay, since I'm using, there's no need for me to say use this. So I'll just come here. Because I'm actually the query, this is, so I don't need to say use this one. So let me just click on this one. Okay, the command runs successfully. So now let's try and do something. Let's try and connect. So for the connection, where's the server? Okay, let's pick the server. Now, basically, the script we run is straightforward. We created a user. Remember that the user we are creating is a contain user. The username is this, but it's for this particular database alone. Okay. So we are using, so for the login, we have, let me just pick it up. So I will not make mistake. So I'm picking this one, contain user. What's the password? So I'll pick up the password. This is the password. Now let me try something. Okay. Now for this database, I'm not, by default is for this particular one, but let me try something without even choosing anything. I just use this particular username. So let me connect and let's see what will happen. Okay, can you say login failed for this particular user? So let's do this. Or I can even do this. What's that database name? I'll minimize it. So yeah, let me just paste it. No, not the. I thought, okay, it's still the password is copying. And this one I want to copy. Copy, yeah. Okay, so let's see. Now, this is the new one. Remember that when we tried without specifying the particular database, it failed. Now, we specify that particular database. So if you look at it, okay, so now, okay, let me do something. Let me just pull down this table. Let me refresh this. Okay, let me do the table here so that we'll just see. Okay, let's just see. The first thing we have is DBO, W build version, data log. Okay, let's minimize this. So if we come here, let me refresh this. Even if you look at, well, let me even refresh this. Okay, I actually wanted to drop the table, so I wonder why it's not giving us. Okay, I think it might take a while. Let me refresh. Or let me do this. Let me disconnect again and connect again. Yeah. Let me connect again. The server name is still the same server name. That one is not changing. So for the username, that's contained user. I mean contained demo. You can use this one too. Still the same thing. So the password. Okay, but the major thing I actually want to bring out is now, if I don't specify that particular now without specifying any default database, that means we are trying to log in at the server instance. Okay, so if I click on this, you discover that it will fail. But let's just wait. Can you see it? It's failing? Okay, but when we now specify that particular database, and remember that we said we are creating a contained instance, I mean a contained users for this particular database. So when I specify this particular database for which that particular user was created within it, okay, so if I put this here now, okay, you discover that we are able to connect to it. Okay, we're able to, let's see, still not giving me the table, but whatsoever the case may be, we are able to connect to it at that particular database level. Okay, let's see if we can still have one more hands-on. Okay, now for this particular one, we also have what they call, remember that we talked about the ownership chaining permission, okay? And we said that when you are talking about that, you want to allow somebody to be able to, it could be a person, it could be a user, it could be, to be able to carry out certain rule or task as a result of permission it has. Now, so if you look at this particular one, you want to execute a stop procedure as a lower privilege user under this particular this. So the first thing is that this must always be set up. Okay. So what we are going to do is this. So let me bring up this. Let's see. Which one are we using? We are using the Adventure LT. Do we have it here? This should be it. That should be it. This should be it because I just changed. So let me just remove this one with the contain user. Okay. So let's say use this one. So if I pick this, so the first thing we need to understand is this, if it has not been set up at that server level. So for this one, this should be at the server level, the master. Let me put this one here. Not supported. Okay. It's not supported. Okay, okay. And this one that my this thing is not working. SSMS. Okay, but let's move on. No worries. So that means for this one now, it is not supported in this particular version. So let's see. This is at the server level, but remember we said we are working with the database. So let's use this one. Let's use that our data. No, let me change it to this one. Yeah, we're working with this database. So let's not forget. Alter the statement field. This functionality is not in the current edition of this SQL server. Okay, maybe we'll try this one on my, let me see. Okay, let me try it on my own local. Okay, let me use this. Let's see. Okay, let's work with this particular database within our local environment. So let me just copy, then we'll just go through each of them. I know our time is almost fast spent, but let me see. So we'll just go through each of them. Let me do new query. I also have not run. Okay, now one thing is, if you look at the first one, this is comment. So if I run this one now, this is at the server level, but this one will not work with Azure SQL Server or Azure SQL database. So if I click on this, the content has been changed to this. Now, if we want to, we've done the server level, okay? But this one now at the database level. So that means, remember, I want to work with this database. That's why if you look at the name. So let's do this. Even automatically, you see that it has changed to this. So this command work. So that means we are setting containment. So if I come here, so what this script is going to do is, it is going to actually create a user, a role, and want to assign permission within that database. to the role and the user will be added to. So the first thing we are doing is, remember, we are working with this particular database. So we are creating a user. So let's create. Okay, this one already exists. Okay, let me just change it to 2 then. Change to 2. Let's see. Okay, I think that is that. So let me change. Okay, so we've created the user. So we are creating a role, which is sales reader. I'm sure it will say this role already exists. Okay, but no worries. Okay, so now we want to add this user as a member of this particular role. Cannot, because it does not exist or you do not have permission. Let me see. Oh. Okay, there's an R missing here. Database, let's try it again. Okay. So now on that schema, remember that this user is a member of this. So we want to try this. Okay, so what's the next thing we'll do? So now the next thing we want to do, okay, is want to create a kind of stop procedure. Let me just, remember we changed our this thing to 2. So let me just copy the whole thing. Then we'll just run this one. I'll just flip it down. I'll put this one as 2. I've created this one. So, okay, let's go with this one. Sales does not exist or you don't have permission to do that. Create or alter sys.deb. Let's see where did I go wrong. Create or alter sales. I hope I've not made any mistake in my. Let's check. Or alter this. Okay. Let's check. Okay, let's check. Probably, I'm sure it's maybe existing. Wait for it. Sales dot. Let me check something. Nothing there. Okay, what I'm looking for. The specific schema sales does not exist. Are you sure? Create or alter this. Okay, let me check something. Okay, I think basically what we'll do is these are things, let's see. Okay, so as not to waste our time, let's see. Let me just look for a good point for us to stop. So we're actually here. Well, like I said, we've actually looked at some couple of things. Okay. So basically what we want to work on, I'll try and fix this. But these are some of the things I've done. Let me see. I hope I'm not making anyone because I know I use the DC DP300 user.
Yeah, Prof, I don't think the schema is available. That's why the script failed.
Yes,
So,
yes, because I know I've tried it. So that's just
yeah.
basically, so
Yeah.
yeah, you are right about that. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just recreate, as in I'll store a new backup of this one and we'll revisit this tomorrow.
Okay, sir.
But let me just give room. Let me give room for any questions so far. Any question if you are in a good
Actually, I
place to
missed the
talk.
part that we can give a temporary access to a user. That is on Azure portal, right? You have to do that.
Yes.
Okay, I'll
Yes.
look at the video. I'll look at the video.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. So we'll see tomorrow by God's grace. So what I'll do is I'll recreate another one because I know that it's because maybe it is actually existing before. You know, when I created that DP3 one, it said it's actually existing. So because I've actually tried out the code. But no worries. So thank you very much. See you tomorrow by God's grace. Okay, let me stop the recording.